So it's been over 3 months now that I haven't created a video. I'm not gonna lie, I am really disappointed. And it would be easy for me, which I definitely tried to do at first, to blame it partially, at least, on the life events. And while those things are valid, if I'm being real with myself, I still had ample time to create if I wanted to. But I definitely was in some sort of a creative slump. It's one thing if the creative slump came from the fact that I didn't have any ideas, but that's not what it is at all. I have a ton of ideas, I always do. I don't lack inspiration, but I've always struggled so much, and I think the majority of people struggle mostly with this, which is the second part, because there's the part where you get the ideas and the inspiration, and the second part, which is the execution, right? And one thing that I realized when I looked back and analyzed my creative slump to find the cause, because there's already so many inevitable, unpredictable external events and factors that cause us harm and frustration and suffering in some way. So making sure that we add on to that as little as possible is vital to our well-being. And so as I looked back and analyzed, I realized that so many of us are in such an abusive relationship with our creativity. Our creativity comes to us all the time with ideas, and half of the time, at least, we ignore it, dismiss it, find excuses, or outright reject it. We'll tell our creativity,
not good enough. It's been done 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and there's no way you're going to do anything that stands out compared to that. It doesn't really match the trends or society's current preferences for that type of creation. Given the time, the money, and the current skills that you have, it's not even worth it. It's going to be mediocre at best.
Why don't you do a little bit more thinking first? If you were to see a movie or a TV show where the main character had a bunch of great ideas and went to a loved one to share said ideas, if you then saw the loved one say the things that I just said, you'd be livid. If you then saw the main character give up on their dreams and ideas and projects as a result of those words, you'd be heartbroken. So you should stop abusing your creativity. So to build, or rather rebuild, because most of us as children did this instinctively, but like many other things, sadly, we kind of lose it along the way. To rebuild a strong, healthy relationship with your creativity, the first thing you have to do is lay a foundation of trust. Like any other relationship, if you don't have trust, you don't have a relationship. So if you don't have trust, you don't have creativity. Or at least you won't be able to execute on said creativity. And despite trust being the foundation of that relationship, establishing trust in your creative process and with your creativity is one of the harder things to do. Because how can you fully trust your own judgment when it comes to your own creation? It's kind of like the fact that you look at yourself in the mirror every single day. And so arguably you've seen your face more than anyone else, right? And yet you don't really know what you look like. The issue is that no matter how hard it is, it's inevitable and you are going to have to work on establishing that trust, because the moment distrust enters your creative process, it's felt immediately. It'll be felt by you, but it'll also be felt by anyone with whom you share your creations. Now, don't worry too much, because even though it's hard, it's far from impossible. And I'll illustrate that with a little story. So a couple of years ago, I was listening to this podcast on emotions. Basically, they dedicated one episode every week or so to a human emotion. And the way they would do it is that they would pick a question, and then they would interview experts and also regular people who would share their personal stories with said emotions. And the episode I want to talk about today is the one on confidence, because I really liked the angle that they took for that episode. Usually they'll interview someone who has struggled with an emotion, and so I thought they would interview people who have struggled with confidence, because there's no shortage of that, I think. And actually, they decided to do a bit of a 180 for that episode, interview someone who had never actually really struggled with confidence. They wanted to know what factors led a human to not really experience self-doubt and just trust their ideas, act on them, and share them. So they interviewed this guy who had become a successful video producer, and he explained that as far as he could remember, he had never really felt any crippling or paralyzing self-doubt or self-esteem issues. And so he had always felt very free to just act on all of his ideas and share all of his creations. They then interviewed his mom, who explained that since her son was a little child, she basically always told him that whatever he did was amazing. Arguably, most parents and adults will do this with little children, right? But the difference here is that the mom explained that she never ever stopped doing that with her son since he was a tiny little child. Then when he went to elementary school, middle school, high school, all the way through college and university, she never stopped complimenting him, and she always found something very encouraging and positive to say about whatever he created. And then they interviewed the experts who, lo and behold, confirmed that that was actually the best way to go to build confidence in a child. And if you want to raise a child that's going to be a very confident adult as well. And I just found that so funny, you know, because in so many cultures, most cultures, dare I say, in so many cultures, there's this belief that if you overpraise a child, somehow it's going to stunt their growth. And I don't know where this fear comes from, because humans have existed for the longest time, and I have yet to see a human who stops doing what they love because they've been praised. And it's such a sad mentality, because when you think about it, even the kids who do achieve success and they achieve their goals and greatness by being raised with such a harsh mentality, they don't really get to enjoy the journey half as much as, for example, the guy that I just talked about does. Because even if they do get to enjoy the achievement, that achievement is such a small, short event in your life. If you work, for example, 10 years for something and then you get the thing, you'll maybe enjoy it for a couple of days or weeks, but you'll never get those 10 years back where you constantly told yourself that you weren't enough. And it'll also really mess up that kid's ability to form good relationships and be happy for others' success and achievements, because if they're always told that they're not enough and that they have to do more to be seen as worthy, other people getting praise and love and encouragement will always sting and will always make them feel like it's going to be that much harder to get the praise. And honestly, I don't know about you, but like, if I look at my life, every time I've received praise or compliments for some type of creation that I've made, it never, it's so absurd. It never made me want to stop. If anything, I was like, oh, wow, this is confirmation that I have what it takes, that there's something here, like I want to do even more, you know? The experts confirm that encouragement builds confidence, not complacency. The only difference is that you're going to be led with trust, love, excitement, instead of distrust, fear, low self-esteem, self-doubt, and comparisons. So if until now you had been creating with that type of mentality of always telling yourself that it's not enough, I think it would be good to just go back to the start and rebuild a foundation with a new mindset of just total trust for any idea that comes to you. Because no matter how long you've been doing this, having the right mindset is truly more important than how long you've been doing this. And don't worry, even though I'm saying that you kind of have to go back to the beginning, because you don't start from scratch, but you'll start from experience. I saw that quote scrolling on social media, and I don't think it was attributed to someone, so apologies, but it's a great quote. What this means in practical terms is that right now the number one priority is to act on your ideas. Act, act, act. Act on as many creations as you can. And you don't have to publish or share all or even most of them if you don't want to during this time. That's totally your prerogative, obviously. But just remember that creativity's biggest killer is not imperfection, it's inaction. And if you think about it, there's really no such thing as a bad creation. There will be creations that you like a lot less than others, but even the ones that you like the least will make you a much better creator because they'll teach you what not to do and what you don't like. So it's truly a net positive. In my case, believe it or not, this is the 5th time that I'm recording this video for different reasons every time. A lot of them have to do with the fact that I overestimated my technical skills, but you know what? It has truly made me, I like to believe, a better creator. I've learned a lot in all of these different recordings. An extra tip regarding all of this is to scratch the itch as soon as possible. And what I mean by that is that ideas are such beautiful gifts. They're like this sort of mixture of energy and visions that amalgamate and appear almost out of thin air, it feels like. But the thing is that they come very quickly and appear in your brain and your mind, but they also will go away just as quickly. I watched this masterclass on YouTube from David Lynch, and it was full of good things, but I really liked the whole part he made about ideas. He compared ideas to fish in a pond, and he said that when that fish appears in front of you, just like in Animal Crossing, you really have to be quick to catch that fish because it's going to swim out just as quickly as it came in. And it's the same thing for ideas. So when I say scratch the itch, basically, when an idea comes to you, try to write it down as quickly as you can, whether it's on a computer, your phone, a piece of paper. Because David Lynch shared, and I'm sure this happened to all of us way too many times, that he himself lost some great ideas for movies because he was a little bit too overconfident and he didn't write them down. And actually, that's a general life advice that I'd like to give. Just write down as much stuff as possible, because even with passwords, like I'll always feel so confident when I create a new password and the next day I'm here like a fool clicking on forgot password. And on that subject, not only should you write down your idea as soon as possible, secondly, you should write down as much as possible, because sometimes I'll write, like, it has happened to me where I wrote four or five words to remember my idea, and then 2 weeks pass, and then I look at the 4 or 5 words and I can't remember what they were about, which is a shame, because I do remember that I felt really intensely about it, and then I just get really frustrated. So the lesson here is just not to trust your creativity, but don't trust your memory too much, or at least don't over rely on it, because we consume way too information these days every day to remember any single piece of information without noting it down. And lastly, on that note, even when you do manage to write it down and everything, I would strongly advise you to act on it as quickly as you can, because so many times I have written it down, but then I let too much time go by. And then by the time I revisited that idea, I just wasn't connecting to it like I did at that time. And it's such a shame, which proves that ideas are truly energy-based and they're all about momentum, is what I realized. So the quicker and the more you can build on that momentum, the better. A couple of months back, I watched this video from FD Signifier, and if you don't know about him, I highly recommend his channel, because he's really one of those people who can talk about anything and make it interesting. If you're not usually interested in one of the topics that he's talking about, it's still worth listening to, and I never regret it, because he's just very pleasant to listen to overall. The video of his that I would like to talk about today is a meta-analysis that he made about video making, in which he interviewed some of his peers who each gave advice that really helped them along the way. The one that really stood out to me was a guy who explained that it is so helpful if you pay close attention throughout to yourself and analyze yourself throughout all the different parts of the creative process, because usually when you're creating something, even more if you're then trying to make a living out of it, but even if you're just creating something and you're taking it a little bit seriously, usually there's different parts to it, right? He was saying to pay close attention because you need to really pinpoint and identify the parts of that creation that you tend to procrastinate more than others, because that's going to give you a really big hint as to what you don't really like doing or what you're not really good at. And therefore, his advice is to delegate and outsource those things as much as possible. That was really helpful and eye-opening to me, because I thought that if there were certain parts of a creative process that I didn't really like or wasn't really good at, then maybe that whole type of creation wasn't for me. Most of the greatest creations on this earth in the history of humanity, at least, especially in art, are the result of a collaboration between different types of intelligences and talents and creatives. But I would like to add on to this really great advice by saying that I don't think this advice should apply solely to things that you don't like and that you're not really good at. My advice would be that for once, instead of letting procrastination always point the finger at you, it's time to pull that Uno reverse card and look at your procrastination and psychoanalyze your procrastination by asking your procrastination, okay, what are the excuses that you always tend to come out whenever I have to do a certain task within the creative process? And I'm saying this because in my case, for instance, I understood the advice that the video maker gave, and I kind of related to it when it came to editing, because honestly, people who are great at editing, I see them as aliens, because it's out of this world. It's so difficult and so time consuming. And so ultimately, when I can't afford it, I will, I think, delegate the editing part of this whole video making, because it's fine. I don't hate it, but it's just not really why I wanted to, the thing that pushed me to start making videos anyway. But one thing that I couldn't understand, and that's why I decided to push that advice further, I couldn't understand why I kept procrastinating the actual recording of the video like I'm doing now, even though I don't mind doing that actually. And so what I did is that I did psychoanalyze my procrastination. I decided to tell myself, okay, I'm gonna film on this day, this day, this day. And then I decided to really pay close attention to my thoughts and take note of the excuses that came out as we were nearing the date and the time at which I set the recording. And surprisingly enough, I did notice a pattern forming between the type of excuses that I would tell myself. And that really helped me understand, come to the bottom of it and understand what the problem was. I hadn't even realized it. It's kind of crazy, the expectations and conditions that we set for ourselves that we don't even notice. Because I literally, I don't know why I even set this expectation for myself, but I had set this precedent and this expectation that every single video of mine, no matter how long, whether it was a 5-minute video or a 1-hour video, had to be filmed and recorded in one single sitting. And so when I listened to the excuses that always came out when I was supposed to record, and especially when I had to record longer videos like the one I'm doing now, the excuses would always be that I'm too tired and I don't have time. Because the thing is that I'm gone for a good part of the day, every single day, Monday through Friday, meaning that I would come back usually mid-afternoon and be pretty tired. And even if I had a bit of energy, I never felt like I had the energy to really record a good video and stay energetic and eloquent throughout that video for the hour or hour and a half, or even sometimes 2 hours with really long scripts that I had to record for. And so without even noticing it, I was always waiting for that perfect day to come where I would have this superhuman, insane amount of energy and all this time and nothing to do. And obviously that never happened. And the fact that I told myself that I had to film in one sitting, that's a form of perfectionism, right? Because I was waiting for that perfect day where I was in a perfect state of mind and physically had all this energy. That made it really obvious to me that that was the problem, because procrastination and perfectionism are best friends. Every time you have that black or white, all or nothing type of mentality, procrastination is going to come and ruin it for you. But at the end, it's kind of doing a gift as well, because if you psychoanalyze it, that's where you're going to find all your solutions. As soon as I realized what the issue was, I was able to remove that expectation. And I told myself, okay, well, this script and this video of mine that has this script has all these different parts. I'm just going to film 1 or 2 parts a day, and we'll see if that changes things a bit. Lo and behold, my problem disappeared, and all of a sudden I felt super excited, and I feel super excited to film this every single day because I only do it for 30 minutes. And so even though I have exams right now, for instance, I come home and I'm still excited to film because it's just going to take me 30 minutes to an hour from start to finish. So yeah, I strongly recommend, if you're struggling with procrastination and you can't really figure out why, to take some extra time and focus to psychoanalyze your procrastination and the excuses that come out. And more importantly, the reason you need to do this is because I think there is this idea online that procrastination is kind of this uniform thing. And I say this because I see online so many videos about how not to procrastinate. And some tips are helpful, I guess, but the way I see procrastination is more so as a symptom, the cause of which is very circumstantial and dependent on each individual and their psyche and their little blockages and experiences. All in all, if you are currently struggling with certain parts of your creation, don't worry too much like I used to. There is always a solution. Just take some time. It does not mean that you shouldn't be doing that creation. It doesn't mean that at all. Just take some time and do some analysis and research. Put your research goggles on and analyze yourself and those little voices. Find a pattern and you'll find the solution and you'll set yourself free really quickly. Regarding the advice of the YouTuber who said that if you do have certain parts of the creative process that you don't like and you don't find enjoyment in and you're really not good at, while in an ideal situation you can delegate and outsource these things, a lot of us, and that's the case for me still, can't delegate and outsource yet because we're not making a living out of whatever type of creation that we're doing. And the key here is to temporarily adjust your expectations and adapt. And if you are in this situation, there are 3 reasons why this is actually still a very beneficial alternative for you. The first reason is that if you look at this situation in a glass half empty way, okay, you have to continue for a little while until you can afford it. You have to continue doing the part of that creative process that you don't really like or you're not really good at. If you look at the glass being half full, the great thing is that you will still be continuing to do what you love and what you're good at. And so you'll feel extremely fulfilled instead of stuck. Because I think we can all agree that rather than not doing the thing that you don't really like, plus not doing the thing that you love, versus having to do the thing that you don't really like, but also getting to do the thing that you love, it's a no-brainer, right? It's the latter. The second unintended benefit is that during the time where you're gonna have to do those things that you're not loving or not really good at, because you have to do them out of necessity, you're naturally gonna get a little bit better at them. I'm not the best at editing, and I never will be like those editing gods that I talked about. But compared to 6 videos ago, I have progressed so much, and that makes me really proud of myself. And last but definitely not least in this case, the fact that you will have done every single part of your creative process enough to know all of the basics thoroughly means that you're going to be a really great collaborator, and you're going to be a really great delegator. And once you will outsource the things, you're going to be a really great team player and colleague. And also, even though this isn't very positive, if someone tries to scam you, someone that you try to outsource to, it's going to be way harder because you know kind of what the thing involves and what they're talking about. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. So yes, adjust your expectations, adapt, and learn to modify your timelines and your perception of time a little bit, especially when it comes to success, I guess. And I think a lot of what success is about scale. So instead of looking at days, weeks, or even months, it's better to look at years, decades even. Okay, so this point and this issue that I want to talk about is actually the whole reason that got me to make this video, and it's the reason why I procrastinated the most, actually. Sometimes we do accept our ideas, we have no problem trusting them, but we still refrain from executing and acting on them. And sometimes it's because we have this expectation that every single part, all the different aspects of the creation have to be at the same level, even though we're not at that level in all those parts. The ones I'm referring to today are form and substance. Because in my opinion, when you look at types of creativity, they really fall under 2 big categories, at least in my head. There's the form, in which there are all the technical skills and the aesthetics, and there's the substance that is more analytical and theoretical, and also storytelling goes into this part. Professionally, the people who are really good at the form type of creativity would be fashion designers, stylists, interior designers. Also on movie sets, they're the ones who are going to create the set, the artistic directors. In the non-professional personal sphere, I guess these people are the ones who always had, since childhood till now, a really pretty handwriting, and they keep their notes very neat and pretty. When you go to their houses, they're really good at making a place feel cozy and homey, and just make sure that all the different parts of their home come together in a cohesive and aesthetically and sensory pleasing way. And these people are usually fairly organized. The substance type of creativity are the people who just love to theorize and analyze and tell stories and just either talk or write about a bunch of different ideas and go very deep just for the sake of it, just for fun. Professionally, these will obviously be writers of all sorts, truly. They can also be philosophers, psychologists. Now, obviously, like most things in life, these 2 things exist on a spectrum, and most people are at one certain point of this spectrum and possess some sort of mixture of substance type creativity and form type creativity. But unfortunately, some people, and that's my case, lean pretty far to one side, which definitely has its challenges when you want to create and you're kind of on your own in the beginning. Because in my case, I'm pretty exclusively a substance type creative. And even though I love aesthetics, I love it, I admire it, I'm a fan of it, I'm tragically very bad at anything that when it comes to the form type of substance. Teachers and friends have complained about my handwriting, and every time I take notes and have to write something, even when I try to make it neat, it's usually very messy. Luckily, and this is one of the only advantages, I'm a germaphobe, so I keep my living space clean, but visually, I'm not going to show you the other parts of my home, but even though I've lived in so many apartments and every time I move into a new place, I'm just like, this time it's going to be different. It always ends up looking like the college dorm of a 19-year-old boy. Anyway, all this to say, the reason I was procrastinating a lot lately is because even though I had all these ideas and I felt great about them, I wasn't sure that my ideas were worth sharing on a video platform, an audio visual platform, because of how unskilled I am at making things aesthetically and sensorially, you get what I mean, pleasing to the senses. Because as all of you know, in today's world, there's so much competition for attention on any sort of media platform. And obviously, anybody who's able to make something very aesthetically pleasing and eye-catching and stimulating gets a huge initial advantage, right? But then I had to kind of check myself, because I know how many times I've been proven wrong about this, and how many times, for instance, I clicked on something that looked great, but that ultimately wasn't very interesting. And conversely, a lot of videos that I watch, I don't really watch them. I listen to them while I'm walking or cleaning, and I enjoy them, certain creators, because of the substance, the ideas, what they're saying, the theories, the analysis, the stories. It's crazy the number of times we will subject ourselves to double standards. I'm a fan of a lot of people who are great at form, but also a lot of people who are great at substance, but I wasn't giving myself the same appreciation and leniency. The moral of the story here is, whether you're more of a substance type creative or a form type of creative, just focus on your gift. And the key word here is focus. Put your energy mainly into what you are good at and what you love. And if there are other things that you have to do that you don't really like, but you have to do, just do the bare minimum, but put most of your energy into what you love. And truly, and this applies, again, you heard this 1,000 times, but this applies to everything, try to compare as little as possible. And also, don't try to imitate when the motivation comes from a sense of lack and fear towards yourself. You can obviously take inspiration, which we're going to talk about in the last part, and which is amazing and almost necessary, I would say. But mimicking because you feel like your art is not good enough, no. If you are afraid that your art and your creations are lacking a little bit too much substance or are lacking a little bit too much form, you need to let go of that and trust. See, here comes trust again. But this time, instead of trusting yourself, what you need to do is trust the world, your audience, even though you don't know who they are. Because like I said, as long as you know that you put the majority of your focus and energy into doing what you do love and what made you want to create in the first place, that authenticity will be felt and it will resonate with a lot of people. We always tend to underestimate just how much diversity there is within the 8 billion people populating this planet. People are so complex and have so many quirks and weird interests. And that's why you see, even in the history of humanity and even today online, countless very niche interests. So don't worry too much about your art being a little bit weird or obscure or lacking certain things that you've seen in other pieces of art. Just do what feels true to you right now in the moment. And by doing so, you're going to get the best gift back, which is you're going to get the most authentic and compatible audience, compatible with you. And the feeling of being seen and understood by someone at that level, when you're going to see that someone is going to resonate with your art and love and understand the messages and the emotions that you put in that art without having explicitly said it, to be seen at that level, there's nothing like it. It's one of the best things about being human. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite types of art and some of my favorite artists and explain to you how that made me realize that I was the problem, or I had a problem at least. To be fair, like most of us, I truly love a very diverse range and variety and genres of art within each art. But one type of art that I consistently find myself liking is the more unconventional and messy and raw type of art. For instance, I love, like, I'll always click and listen and often end up enjoying to videos of YouTubers or baby YouTubers who barely know how to use a camera, but who really speak in such a heartfelt and honest and authentic way. On social media platforms, I always find myself gravitating towards those artists such as John Michael Frank, who kind of draw as if they were 5-year-old children, but with that always comes a sort of very universal truth that they're trying to convey, or some very raw emotion. And for some reason, the fact that the drawings look like a 5-year-old's drawing makes the whole message and the whole art a lot more powerful and pure. It's almost like this reminder that we're all children at heart. It's also very primitive. If you look at the cave paintings, it's kind of done in that style as well. It's not really about all the technique, etc., so you can't really hide behind it, so there's really no pretense. All in all, I don't know, the moment I see a drawing in that style, I'll just click on it. I love it. I don't know why, it makes me so happy. And it's the same thing for music. For instance, I love Kid Cudi, and especially his humming. I always find myself hoping that he's gonna hum at some point in the song. And I know that this is a popular opinion because there's hour-long compilations on YouTube that have a lot of views of him just humming. And there's something so healing about it. There's even memes made about how healing it is, and it's because it's so raw and it's not 100% pitch perfect, the tone. It kind of feels like your friend is just humming to a song when you guys are on the road or something. It's everything. Same thing with the Swedish artist Young Lean, and it's a beautiful coincidence, but I already wanted to talk about him because, for instance, I really recommend you, if you're trying to see what I'm talking about here, you watch his last song and music video called Young Forever, because the whole essence of the exact type of art that I'm trying to describe is concentrated within that video, visually and auditorily. The production value is low. It feels like his friend shot it on his phone. And his voice, he's singing throughout the song kind of, and it's never quite pitch perfect. And for some reason, you can't stop listening to it. And the coincidence I'm talking about is that last night I was on YouTube and a short interview of his just popped up. And it was one of those videos where the interviewer was testing his knowledge of music. And at one point, Young Lean said, "You know, a lot of my favorite artists, and I think that a lot of the best artists, don't really have textbook perfect singing voices." And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly why I like you. And actually, I'm gonna talk about you for this exact reason tomorrow. That's crazy. Now, of course, there's also ample space, and I love that as well, for more technically perfect art. I have friends who can draw faces that look like pictures. That's insane. In music still, for instance, of course, Whitney Houston, Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo.
Happy birthday to you.
Wow. Obviously, these people have stunning, elite, amazing voices, and I love to listen to them. But my message here is that there's ample room and appreciation for both. And if the former type that I just talked about, the Young Leans, the Kid Cudis, the John Michael Frank, the illustrator, had all told themselves, no way, I'm not going to invest time and energy into try to becoming a singer or an artist of any sort when there's people out there who have set the bar so high for what is technically good that it makes me a joke in comparison. If they had told themselves that, we wouldn't have all of that art that I just described and described and so much more. And it would be such a tragedy because these people have huge fan bases whose life is improved thanks to this art. But then thinking about that, I really realized how much of a hypocrite I was. Because why am I such a fan of the messy, unconventional, non-textbook, raw type of art myself? But then when it came to me wanting to create, I would tell myself that unless my art was technically at a certain level and conventionally aesthetic, etc., and well-produced, whatever, then I shouldn't create. Why did I set such a crazy double standard? And the answer is ego-driven, fear-driven self-sabotage. Ego-driven because my ego subconsciously was telling me, okay, well, although if you create, some parts will be really good, the parts that make you want to create and stuff, but if any part of what you create is mediocre, then that's a reflection of you. And first of all, that is the textbook definition of self-hatred, just looking at your imperfections and making them define your entire worth. Trash. And also having a healthy ego and learning to build one is also about learning that your opinions are not your entire identity. Your creations are not your entire identity. I really love what Malcolm Gladwell said about this. He appeared on Trevor Noah's podcast, and he was saying, hold your values closely, but your opinions loosely. Because opinions just come and go. And he was actually saying that he recently reread a book that he wrote in the 90s, and that he actually found himself arguing with himself with his past self who had written the book the entire time. And instead of seeing that as embarrassing and shameful, he just saw it as a natural proof that he had evolved and grown. He never thought that that meant that his book never should have been written. And we can take this further and tie it to the whole art and artist and how closely attached they are or should be, but that's for a whole other day. Again, just create what you are called to create in that moment and tell yourself that as a result, if you share it, some people will just think that you make good art and some people won't. And if anyone tries to attribute more character or personality traits to you as a result of that art, that is not your business. I know we always want to love the artist behind some of our favorite art, but to me, those are two separate entities. So let go of the idea that any part of your art and any imperfection will be a direct reflection of you. Now, that was the ego-driven part. The fear-driven part is very closely related to the ego-driven part, but basically it's the fear of being mocked or judged negatively or seen as cringe or seen as mediocre, etc., etc. When it's related to the ego, there is a fear of your reputation and everything. But there's also fear related that's more of a primal nature. And there is a fear of rejection, right? And that fear and rejection triggers this anxiety whereby we try to put ourselves in the shoes of the most critical, mean, negative person, and we try to predict every possible criticism that can be made towards our art, which because of the ego, we equate to criticisms towards ourselves. And this is another time where you got to remember that you're not in the fucking jungle. And what I mean is that, and I have to tell myself that so much, this is this human thing that we have evolved to, this human trait that we have evolved to possess because of our times when we were cavemen and women. Because obviously at the time, the person who had a bit of anxiety and who could really think of all the negative stuff that could happen.
A tiger can come from here. If we sleep here, some mosquitoes can come and kill us. I also have to be careful because the plants over here are good, but the ones that are really similar over there are poisonous. Oh, and did I make sure to bring enough wood for the whole night so that the fire can stay lit and we don't freeze to death? Did we make sure that snakes couldn't enter while we're sleeping?
I don't know. I've never been in the jungle like that. But anyway, this is why a lot of us struggle with anxiety today because we still have this innate trait of always trying to predict all the wrong things that could happen. The problem is that hypervigilant human trait was meant for life-threatening situations. So respectfully, just tell yourself that all of that is BS. When you have the ego-driven, fear-driven self-sabotage that comes up, listen to it and be like, I see what you're doing. I'm fine. And even if people don't like what I put out, it's none of my business. It's none of my business because I like what I put out. And people not enjoying one or several of my creations has nothing to do with my safety. One thing that has been super helpful for me when I still have one or two voices telling me that my creation is a little bit lacking in some way is reminding myself that art serves so many purposes. It can be beautiful, it can be thought-provoking, it can be comforting, it can be political, it can be critical, it can be a celebration. It can help people feel less alone. It can make people laugh. It can make people cry. It can make people love. It can help people heal. It can give some people confidence. It can make people feel like they're not a fucking weirdo. It can make people feel like life is worth living. And like I said earlier, once your art is out there, it's going to take on a whole new life, and it's going to be interpreted in ways you couldn't even imagine. And that's also something that you should be excited for. Therefore, when the self-sabotaging, paralyzing thoughts come in, always remember that the pros far outweigh the cons. Also, in general, do as much ego work as you can, especially when you see a little part of unhealthy ego creep in. It's gonna help you so much with just feeling at peace. And it's really worth the momentary humbling experience that it is, and a little bit of shame and embarrassment. And it makes you overall a much more compassionate person with yourself and with everyone. And you'll feel so free to do whatever you want because you'll know who you are and you have your values, and that's all that's gonna matter. Last but not least, the infamous creativity killer, the fear of unoriginality. Just a little embarrassing anecdote that I want to share. When I was younger, I used to think that infamous was just a fancy word for famous. And so I wrote that in an essay, and the way the teacher clocked me, life will always make sure that you stay humble. Last year, I read this book called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. And the chapter that really stood out to me is one where he explained that no art is created in isolation. Every artist is influenced by other artists, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it is, and that's the way it's always gonna be. Even in the master class, that's on YouTube, by the way, from the late David Lynch that I mentioned earlier, he shared that his art is full of little references and Easter eggs of pieces of art that he's a fan of. You can think of any genius in any field of art, they had to start by imitating what was around them. Creation is a very collective enterprise, and every great creator is also a very big fan of art. And I'm saying this because at times a lot of us do hold back and refrain from creating because we tell ourselves that, oh, I only want to make this because I'm heavily inspired by a piece of art that I just consumed and that I really like, or by an artist. Or you tell yourself that the market is saturated and that there's just so much similar stuff that's out there already. Even with me, every time I start writing a script about one topic for a YouTube video, the next week, YouTube is going to recommend a video that is pretty much on the exact same topic, or one that's very similar at least, and that just got published the week before and has a ton of views. And then I do get those self-sabotaging thoughts of, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this then, because who's gonna want to watch another video on the exact same topic a week later? But then I thought about it and I realized that it couldn't be further from the truth. And actually, there are 3 reasons why you should still be creating what you initially wanted to create in the exact same manner that you wanted to create it. The first one is, again, remember that there's over 8 billion people on this earth, and on each social media platforms, there's at least 2 billion people. And within those 8 billion people, there's people who, for instance, don't discover that they love jazz music until their 40s. There's people who don't get really into reading until their 30s. There's people who want to start working on themselves a little bit later in life and try to become a better person because before that they were extremely busy or they had trauma, what have you. So don't worry, because no matter how much is already out there, there's always going to be new audiences for whatever you want to create. Secondly, don't forget that 99.9% of people do not consume just one unit of something that they love. Fans of punk rock aren't going to listen to one song and realize that they love punk rock and then never listen to any other punk rock song ever again. Same with music, books, paintings, videos. For instance, I love anime and I like different genres of anime, but really, if you take one genre like isekai or shonen or shoujo, there's thousands of animes within each of these genres. But if you take a single genre, a lot of the time they follow the same structure. In shonen, you have a lot of the same character arcs for the main character who's nice but kind of like not as strong as the others, but thanks to his amazing personality and resilience, he becomes the best. There's always his best friend who's a little bit like dark, but then he becomes a better person thanks to the main character, etc., etc. In shoujo anime, the romance animes, you always have a scene where either the boy or the girl gets sick, and that's a really key bonding moment for both of them because the other one takes care of them. And even though we've seen it 100 times, we eat that shit up, okay? Like, imagine finding a new genre of YouTube video or film or music that you realize that you love, and then come to find out there's no other thing like it on the face of the earth. You'd be devastated. So don't force originality just for originality's sake, and just create what you want. Number 3 is that if you do happen to make some sort of art that for you has a message or a meaning, remember that us humans are quite forgetful, and that fortunately for you, we need to be reminded of the same lessons over and over and over and over again. Life teaches us the same lessons in cycles at various points of our life and evolution. That's why when you were a kid, your parents and adults and people around you older people told you so many lessons, and even though you understood the words that were being said, you didn't get it. And then as you got older and had some experiences, a lot of painful ones often, you just learn more and more about the reality of life. And then sometime later, you'll read a book or you'll watch a movie or something, and the lesson that you were told as a kid is going to be repeated in some way again to you at this time. And at that moment, the light bulb will turn on and you'll go, oh, that's what that meant. And the moment you get it, you just can't fathom the fact that at some point in your life, you were running around like a headless chicken without true understanding of this knowledge and this truth. But that's why us humans truly need repetition in our lives. Through different voices, different contexts, different means of communication, we receive the message when we're ready for it. The moral of the story is that instead of feeling discouraged, see it as the fact that your ideas really resonate with a lot of people. In a world that's so obsessed with, tragically, with differences and separation, it's actually a great reminder for us that at the core, a lot of us share the same values and feelings, emotions, and experiences. Creativity should never be seen as a competition for a scarce resource, because it is not. It's an infinite resource. It's limitless. That is all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. And I truly hope that this will help you to create burden-free and to your heart's content. See you next time.